Hey guys, I'm just going to do a quick video on a couple things that we talked about this week that I want to really mention to a lot of people out there that have questions based on managing low back pain. In fact, we did a very relevant workshop seminar at Performance Unlimited based on just that, managing low back pain, which 80% of all human beings will have some sort of low back pain in their lives. A little bit of a crazy statistic. So vast majority of people out there that are listening to this, yeah, I'm talking to you, and the vast majority of people that are listening to this that have had or want to stay away from back pain literally are not doing the things that I'm about to mention for you. So quick, down and dirty things that you need to do. Well, number one, you need to be consistent in some of these concepts. So looking at the research and really dialing into all the variability and all the different things that go into risk factors as it relates to common back pain. There's so many different viewpoints and so many different conclusions that a lot of these research studies are taking that creates some complexity to it. I want to actually dive a little bit more deep into the simplicity of what all of those different research results are actually showing us. Number one, they all have one commonality, that no matter what direction they're looking at it from, what lens they're biased towards when it results in what the risk factor or causation of back pain actually is, they all agree that lumbar spine instability. And there is a little bit of variation in what that definition is, but we can take a very common definition created by the researcher Punjabi, and what he defines as lumbar instability as being able to create a lack of creating a reactive stability or control in a specific and appropriate range of motion. Now they got to keep these vague terms because all of that means, the meaning in all of that is really just because it's individual. And what normal range of motion should be for one person, what control should be for within that range of motion is going to vary from person to person because our bodies are all different. They're all very unique. So our biomechanics, so the nature of our anatomy is going to be different as well. However, what we do need in that range of motion is the ability to create full function in all planes of movement for that joint. And for those joints, I guess there's multiple of them in that lumbar spine. So when we're talking about, the most common pain point, the most common dysfunction and compensation that we actually have at L4, L5, or L5S1, we've got to be able to have a certain amount of flexion and extension, lateral flexion, rotation, and a combination of all of those that allows us to actually have functional activity, whatever that function needs to be, picking up something from the ground, putting it overhead, being able to brace against something, whatever the case may be, running, jumping, walking, sitting. You can see that myself right now is in more of a natural position. We're going to get to that in just a second, but coming back into what that normal function actually is. Again, we don't want to get too dialed into black and white, but we do want to keep it simple, meaning that you've got to have a good range of motion and hypermobility, or too much range of motion without the control of that range of motion is really one big issue, or a lack of range of motion and still being able to control that range of motion, but having an inadequate range of motion that doesn't allow you to go through full aspects of function is also going to be a high risk factor. So two things about that, simplify it. One, we have to have range of motion. Okay. Two, we have to be able to control that range of motion. So we're talking about range of motion can be simplified in assessing that as really passive range of motion. So if I think about most stretches, and they go in both forms, but if you think about most stretches, me being able to just reach in and touch this toe, the facets of what I'm actually stretching, mostly in the posterior chain, hamstrings, glutes, some calves here, and everything in between, they are being supported by the ground. I am being moved into this position very simply by gravity. So this tends to be more of a passive stretch. Same thing if I was on the ground and I was holding my leg up on, say, this countertop or a wall. That's all passive stretching. I'm not working hard to get myself into that position, creating an activity of muscle contraction that's actually keeping me there. Now, if I was on my back and I was pulling my leg into that position without any supplemental support or any body actually pushing me into that position, that would be more of an active range of motion, meaning that I'm actively pulling with a contraction of my muscle or muscle groups to actually create a stretch, usually on the opposite or opposing side of that muscle group that's actually going to get the result. So passive, great way to increase range of motion. Active increases our functionality of it by implementing one very important piece: control of your range of motion. Now the difference in my leg or hip flexion and my leg lift here, if passively somebody's moving me into the direction, this being my hip, this being my leg, if somebody's moving me into this range of motion, that being passive, okay, if I can get to 90 degrees, but then that person walks away and actively I am by myself trying to lift my leg and I can only get to, say, 80 degrees, we've got that 10% decrement. That decrement right there is where our trouble spots are. So that lack of, or that difference between active and passive range of motion is a key component for where we're trying to go as it relates to the original definition, putting it all back together with lumbar stability, okay? So let's talk about what that actually means for you and your back pain. So how can we create lumbar stability by kind of getting the best of both worlds? The biggest bang for our buck. Number one, we can actually put ourselves into position where passively, in a lot of joints in the body, we're creating flexibility or increasing joint range of motion. So we're getting a skill development there. But then actively, we're trying to maintain postural control. So in most of the positions that I'm about to show you, these are based on an osteopathic researcher out there named Philip Beach. Definitely look him up. He created something that's called the 12 archetypal positions or postures for rest. So these resting positions are literally what he deemed as evolutionary in basis, where we would actually be the only 12 positions where our body could actually drop into the rest and digest, the parasympathetic response, that we could recover, recoup, regenerate all of the needed energy and demands that we actually would have evolutionarily to have to go back into the world to hunt, to gather, to procreate, to do whatever we actually needed to do. Being more so on the opposite end of the spectrum, sympathetic nervous system for fight or flight. So again, bringing this back down into context, we at Performance Unlimited have created more of a light version. It's our 7-step postural assessment and exercises that allow us to get into 1, passive range of motion to increase flexibility, 2, maintain quality of that posture so that we're actively pursuing those stabilizing muscles and creating more stability. So I'm gonna follow this video up with a little bit more of a showcase into what those 7 positions are and how we're going to do them. But what you have to understand is this has to be daily. So these small, short, low volume, meaning it's not gonna take a long time, low volume activities done consistently, repeated frequently, meaning at a minimum 1 time a day, are what's gonna really build the sustainability of your low back, your lumbar spine to create stability, thus getting you away from those high risk factors for chronic low back pain or occurrence of back pain. So try it out. Check out some of the videos that are coming after this that are guiding you in those 7. Do a little bit of research on Philip Beach and his archetypal resting postures. I think you'll learn a lot from that if you like to deep dive into some rabbit holes and go a little bit further. If not, just check out some of the videos that are following this that are linked onto this so that you can actually build out a simple, quick 8-minute routine that's going to really start to improve your mobility and keep you away from back pain.